Hey everybody, hey Black Books. This is my video for Klara and the Sun. Thanks Lex, I think it was your recommendation. I absolutely loved it. It was, right up my alley in terms of genre and style and everything like that. I've read a couple books by Ishiguro before, Buried Giant and Artist of the Floating World, which also have sort of surrealist themes, I guess. And there was another one called Never Let Me Go, which also got made into a film about clones being brought up as organ donors, which sort of has some similar themes as well, which is really worth watching or reading. So I really enjoyed it. What I liked specifically was that it didn't treat you like a dummy. It kind of drip feeds you details and then you need to contextualize it yourself. For example, the terms AF, which if I'm not mistaken isn't ever explicitly described. I sort of took it to be like artificial friend or something along those lines. Getting lifted, they don't talk a lot about it, apart from the fact that obviously it's a risk, and it makes the kids smarter. The father talks a little bit about how there's attacks going on in the cities, and that's never really explained in depthly. The Cootings machine, what it actually does, I took it to be some sort of generator. But yeah, all of those details that aren't explicitly stated, you just have to make an idea in your mind and fill in the blanks, and I thought that was really smart and really genius. The way the author describes the little idiosyncrasies of human behavior as well from a robot's perspective. Like to be able to separate yourself as a human from human behavior and looking at it and talk about it like you've never seen it before was really cool, and I thought he did that really well. There were a couple of passages I wrote down, an example of that. This was after the meeting with all the lifted kids. I'd begun to understand also that this wasn't a trait peculiar just to Josie, that people often felt the need to prepare a side of themselves to passers-by, as though they might be in a store window, and that such a display needn't be taken so seriously once the moment had passed. So the way Klara learns about human behavior and the way that that's written. And there was another part on the highway, which talking about cars, which is thoughts I used to have when I was super little on road trips. One would appear in the far distance and come speeding towards us, but the drivers never made errors and always managed to miss us. So just small things like that, where he talks about human behavior and sort of reveals it for how bizarre it is. Was really well done. Other things I liked, the replacement AF doll, the portrait guy. At first it's sort of set up to be a bit sinister, and you think maybe he's like a weird pedo or something like that. And Melania, the housekeeper, was like, "Ooh, don't trust him. I think something weird's going on." And then you're set up to sort of think it's bad, and then it is bad, but in a completely different way, and it's this fucked up AF replacement body, and that's even darker than you could even possibly imagine. And I thought that was terrifying and horrifying and brilliant. And the fact they talk about Sal had a sort of more primitive version, I guess, doll copy made after she died to help with the grief coping. There's actually a really good Black Mirror episode where basically just that exact thing happens, which is worth a watch. I sympathize with the father's struggle because he's the only one really apart from maybe Rick and Rick's mother, who think that that you can still enjoy life without being accepted by society. You know, there are other things other than your job and your status. And he's trying to get that point across, but he's a bit of a nupty, and he can be a bit annoying about it. But I thought that was a good character. I liked the contradiction between the fact that the AI is obviously genius and learning and super crazy technology, but it also has this belief in God, well, a metaphor for God, for the sun, basically, and how it gets its nourishment. And I thought that was a really good juxtaposition, this super smart thing having this sort of belief, and it created a good tension. You sort of, the book's coming along, you're wondering if Klara's super naive, and if these little trips she's doing to the barn are crazy or a flaw in the programming, but then it ends up being the right thing. So I thought that was quite smart. I didn't love the ending. It was a little bit too happy ending for me, although obviously the Klara getting tossed aside to the dump was pretty fucked up. But classic humans. I'd be curious to know how people thought of the visuals again. I know I usually ask this, but how everyone pictured Klara. I know she's described as sort of being like a small girl with like a chic French short haircut, and I guess she's humanoid. But to what extent people pictured like a full human looking girl, or I sort of flitted between a small girl and also like sometimes I saw her just as like a robot with sort of robot features. So I'd be curious as how people perceived the image. Speaking of vision, that was something I didn't quite get that well. I'm not sure if I missed something, but Klara's vision specifically being broken into boxes and how people pictured that. It seems like she could sort of zoom in on some things with some boxes, and then some were doing different things, and I couldn't really get my head around that, so I'd be curious to know what you guys thought. Is that everything I wanted to say? I think so, yeah. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's, as I said, it's completely my style of book, and it made me think a lot, and it was a little bit heartbreaking and dark, and yeah, brilliant. So on to the next book, and yeah, really curious to hear everyone's thoughts. I hope everyone's all happy and healthy, and I'll see you next time.